Hi, it's Mickey from Flipping Spain, and today's video is called No Money, No Problem. I wanted to make this video for a couple reasons. First of all, because you've heard me talk about my mystery budget that I have, and that I'm going to buy something and own it outright, which means I must have some cash in the bank, right? Well, I'm not rich. I just want to say that up front, and I will explain how I'm able to do this. If you start looking into real estate investing, you hear a lot about, well, there's always money, you can find money, just find the deal, you'll find the money. And sometimes there's not a lot of substance in telling you how to do that. So I'm not going to go all into all the details, but I just want to encourage you by telling you that it is possible, and I'll give you a few tips and tricks in case you want to try this yourself. I do have money in the bank. I have more money in the bank than probably most people. However, I don't have nearly as much money in the bank as I would have if I had been more savvy with my real estate to begin with. And the reason I have money is because I worked really, really hard at my job when I was a real estate agent, and I saved a lot, and I also bought a few rental properties with regular loans, but I sold them. And I think I've mentioned this before. I kind of regret that, because if I had kept them and they were giving me rental income right now, then I might even be retired. I definitely would be living a lot more comfortably. But I didn't do that, so we're starting over and working with the knowledge that we have to learn from the mistakes of our past. So in general, there's two directions you can approach creative financing or finding money from. One is that you reduce your expenses so that you're able to save more, assuming that you're earning. And the other is to just find other people with money who will help you do a deal. So we'll talk about a lot of different opportunities for that. But I did want to chat just for a second about reducing your expenses. One of the key things that I've been doing for a while is house and pet sitting. So I'm on a couple of online services, and I've done this all over the world. And I usually use it as a way to travel without having to pay for accommodation. But it has really turned out to be a great way to save money. So for example, I think last year, I've been in sort of a transition period. I've been back to the US to sort of see if that felt all right. I'm here in New Zealand, seeing how this feels living here. And it can be really expensive to relocate and rent short-term apartments, especially Airbnb has just gone through the roof. But I've been house and pet sitting, and I only look for longer term, 1 month or 2 months or more. And in the past year, I've done it in London, I've done it in California, I've done it here in New Zealand, and I think I've paid rent for maybe 2 months last year. So that's massive, especially when you're in places like California or even here in New Zealand. Rent can be like $2,000 a month. So, and I'm not earning enough money to pay that kind of rent. I can tell you that right now. Yeah, so that's just one example of a creative way of reducing your expenses while you're trying to save up to buy a property. So the trick to doing real estate when you don't have a lot of money, or you don't have any money even, is called creative financing. And all that means is if you can find a way, and you can find someone else with money who agrees with you, then you can do it. And that can look like a lot of different things. And if you're interested in that, there are tons and tons of podcasts and forum posts and all sorts of things you can read about and watch in order to learn more about that in detail. I'll just give you some of my own personal experience. So for example, my first apartment that I bought all by myself on my own, it cost $85,000. Well, that's what they were asking. But I did not have a proper job. I had only just started working as a real estate agent, which meant I was self-employed. I think I had earned $7,000 the year before, and I had tons of debt, credit card debt that I had racked up while I was learning to do my job. But I was paying rent, and my rent was going up and up, and I was living in places that weren't great. Like I moved out of a place because I realized the building was full of cockroaches, and that didn't sit well with me. So I was looking for a solution. And since I was an agent and I was out looking at all the properties for sale, I had come across this tiny little studio apartment that was right on the top of the building. It was less than 400 square feet itself, and it was just one room, just a box. The building was nothing fancy, like a 1960s brick, but it had its own patio that looked out towards the mountains that was bigger than the apartment itself. And I just fell in love with it. Also, it was really cheap. So I did talk to a loan officer from a bank. He never even got back to me once I sent him my taxes from the year before, probably because I didn't qualify for any loans. But he didn't even bother to tell me, which was rude. I did go to my family to ask for their help, but they did not want to give it, so I took that no. And then I happened to be looking at properties with a client who I knew had a ton of money in the bank. He had enough cash in the bank to buy this apartment, that's for sure. And he was struggling to find something that he wanted to buy, and I knew he was interested in opportunities for investing, and so I went to him and I just said, look, I want to buy this apartment. I can't qualify for it now. Within a year, I can qualify for a loan and pay you back. And would you consider being my bank, basically? Now, I didn't have any knowledge of special financing or anything like that. I just had a goal, and I was looking for a way to make it happen. So he asked me some questions. I sent him a credit report. I talked about my plan for paying him back. He came and saw the apartment. He even asked me, it's so small, like what happens if you meet somebody and you guys want to move in together? And I was like, I don't think we need to worry about that. Like that's not an issue here. So in the end, he agreed. I set the parameters. I said, look, I'd like to borrow this much money from you at a really low interest rate, 3% interest rate. I only want to pay interest. I don't want to pay interest and principal. So I'll pay you this much per month, and then I will buy the apartment from you for $10,000 more than we're paying for it today. And that gave him a return of around maybe 13%, I think, total. So he thought it was a good deal. I was super thrilled, so we did it. Now, I didn't even structure it the best way possible. I could have saved myself that extra 10 grand or some other things like that, but I needed it done, and I found a way to do it. So that's what we mean when we say creative financing. So there is money out there. It just depends on A, how much you want to pay for it, and B, if you can convince someone to give it to you. So some of the other options are things like, of course, regular bank loans. Those aren't always an option for everyone. You don't have enough of a down payment, or you don't have a work history, or you've worked in an industry where you get tips and things that haven't been declared. Whatever the reason is, there are plenty of them. So if you can't do that, there are also loans called hard money loans, which I talked about in the Illinois flip video. Those are expensive, and they usually do want to see a lot of paperwork, including wanting to know that you have experience with real estate before they'll trust you or see you as a good risk. So what I did with my client was what we would call a private money loan, and that's where there's no banks involved. It's just somebody with money and somebody who wants to buy a property. And that is where you can really get creative, because all the deal has to do is make sense. And all make sense means is whatever you guys agree. And that's really one of the things I love about real estate is there are rules, but there are a lot of times where there aren't rules, and you really just get to make it up and make it work however you want for you. Now, how do you get these private money loans? Well, that involves networking, and it's really all about relationships. So, like I said, I knew this guy as a client, so he already had a relationship with me. Friends and family are an option, even though they come with their own different kinds of baggage, and sometimes doing business with friends and family isn't the best idea. The point is that if you see an opportunity, give it a shot. If I hadn't been brave enough to ask that guy for $85,000, then I might not be sitting here talking to you today. Now, as always, you need to vet your business partners. You need to make sure that they do business the same way you do business, and you can never, ever assume. I have been burnt a couple of times, which I'll probably talk about in other videos, where I just trusted that if something was on paper and we had signed it and agreed to it, that we would both live up to our side of the bargain. And I have worked with people who definitely have not. And that has cost me money. It has cost me time. And both of those things are very important in real estate investing. And funnily enough, both the times I've really struggled is when I've been the lender. So I had a little cash in my pocket. Someone had a deal they were struggling to get done. And so I lent them the money to finish it. Well, I never saw a receipt, and I never saw evidence that work was being completed. I really think that they just took my money and put it in the bank and spent it on whatever it was that they needed, whether it was debts or just paying the bills or whatever. But I don't know. that worked out okay in the end. We ended up selling the house, but that was because I had to step in and take control and make sure it got done, and we got it sold. And it was about 6 months late. I was then paying interest, so my return was shrinking and shrinking, but in the end, it did turn out to be a positive in that we made money. I had another instance where I lent money to someone who had lent money to me before, and so I thought he would do business with me the same way we had when the roles were reversed, but he didn't communicate with me at all. He just said, "We finally closed. I'm sending you the money," but it wasn't the full amount. And he never warned me about that. I never saw the paperwork that showed me that this is what I should get. And I asked him, I said, because he told me he had other deals that were struggling as well due to the pandemic and everything. And he said, well, he would basically said that he was treating other customers better than me because they were bigger than me and more important than me. And I was like, yeah, but I'm the poor guy that, like, this is all the money I have, I'm really taking a hit here. So as I said, it's all about relationships, and the sooner you can start building those relationships, the better, because you don't want to just meet someone, hi, I'm Mickey, can I borrow some money from you? Like, that's not going to feel good, and it's usually not going to work out well. So it's about building rapport, building trust, doing a deal maybe any way you can. There are people who they do what they call land contracts or seller financing, where they don't actually put any money down on the house. They just write an agreement that the seller is going to finance it for them, and then they either on-sell it to someone else for a little bit of a profit, or they rent it out so that the rent is then making the money they need to pay the owner the loan amount. So that probably didn't make any sense to you, but that's okay. You can look it up or ask me in the comments and I'll explain it a little better if you really want to know. But the idea is that even with no money, so again, for example, that first apartment I bought, I actually walked away with money because I was my own real estate agent and I got a commission off of it. So I think that's the way you should do real estate. You should get paid to do it. My one other tip, besides really vetting your business partners, is to never overcommit. So, for example, when I did the Illinois flip and I had that hard money loan and I had huge monthly payments with interest, and that just made me so uncomfortable. And as time went on, I was started to be worried about making those payments. So I don't like to do deals where I have to make monthly payments. So a lot of the deals I do is a partnership where I'm doing the work, someone's putting in the money, and then we just split the profit at the end. There's no payments during the project. So that makes me more comfortable. And that's just for me, that's the way I like to work. Also allow for a reasonable timeline. The deal I was just talking about, I borrowed some money from someone to lend it to this guy because we were going to do this deal in 5 or 6 months. Well, it took 14 months. So I was paying a lot longer. Those people wanted their money back. So you just need to be careful what you're committing to, because you don't want to overcommit yourself and then be stressed out on top of the usual stress. And also don't be afraid to negotiate. You can set your own terms. I want to pay this much interest or this, someone out there might take that deal. If it's a good enough deal, someone out there will take it. And that's really what it comes down to again and again is the numbers. So if you find a deal like the biker bar, a house for $6,000, I bought it, I owned it, I just put it out there and said, hey, I found this house, I think we can fix it up for this much, I think it'll sell for this much, and the numbers looked so good, and someone jumped on it and was like, yeah, I'll lend you that money, no problem, no paperwork, no nothing. I say no paperwork, no problem. Don't take me 100% on my word with that. You should always have everything in writing. It doesn't guarantee that people will behave, again, as I have mentioned, but you do want to do things in a legitimate way to protect all the parties involved. You should always have contracts, always have things spelled out, and have exit strategies for if things don't go the way you want them to go, because that happens a lot. So that's my take on no money, no problem. I think there are lots of ways to do real estate, but I also know that if you're trying and trying and trying to make something work and it isn't working, then you probably should walk away, because it's probably not the deal for you, and there will always be another deal around the corner. So I can't wait to find them, and I can't wait to explore some private money or creative financing options on the ground in Spain, and I will definitely let you know more about those. But until then, have a great day, and I will see you in the next video.